With the release of the Premium Battle Decksets right around the corner, I figured now is a great time to showcase some of the builds that I've been working on for all 3 of these decks that are going to be releasing. Now, keep in mind, I'm not the world's biggest expert on at least 2 of these decks, so this is just kind of like a first take, like, hey, this is how I'm going to consider building it if I actually ever decide to build these. At least for one of them in particular, because I have no clue for Neonectar. But regardless, I'm going to be showcasing them in no particular order and kind of just going from there. So I want to first start off with Cecilia, because this is the one build I questioned quite a bit. So obviously when it comes to Cecilia, for some odd reason they decide to put the one that when it's placed from deck it gets +5 in a crit for the grade 3 slot, but I think you honestly need reverse a bit more. So Cecilia reverse in itself not only gives you an extra like couple of attacks to work with, but in weird cases, because of how she plays, you could do Cecilia, go into the stride, and then you'll get this, and then you could apply any triggers onto it, and then just kind of wombo combo from there. So I think for that reason, you do a 4-4, and you're comfortable with doing that, because the V version of regular Cecilia is just not useful at all. So I think this is the one deck out of all of the ones that are available that where you technically need to see the original Cecilia to actually do much of anything. Then for the grade 2s, I feel Sylvia is kind of mandatory because it allows you to get a plant token for free. And then I did a weird like thing where I am running this still, specifically because it's like a combo extender. So like there's weird instances where you're able to get another plant token on the board, and that's actually impactful. Yeah, so it's just overall like just nice utility on that front. And then we have on Augusto, excuse me. Augusto is just a nice little 2-off that I decided to put into the build, specifically for the off chance that where you need like a nice way to clear your board, but also in those instances where you just need a little bit more shield. So that's when he comes up in particular, because you can also send him back in. That's just overall nice utility. And then I'm running this as a 3-of, because I get the feeling you're just going to see it when you need to. Like, it's nice to have, but also, like, it's very situational, right? I think you could afford to gut this down to, like, you could gut this down to a 2-of if you need to make space for the Regalis piece a bit more, specifically the Bracing Angel Ladder. If you want to do it like that, that's fine. I didn't put it in this build because I kind of forgot about it up until when I made the Revenger build, so if you want to do that, that's perfectly fine. Then for the grade 1s, this is where, again, I was just not sure how to actually go about it. Running this is a nice 2-of, just because, you know, +10 is always very good. And then I'm running this as a full 4-of still, specifically because thanks to the grade 2 Searcher, you're just going to eventually find it. And so for that reason, you kind of do want to just see this as your main ride target, and any way to like get into it as your first main grade 1 ride target is probably ideal, because the other grade 1s are just more so useful on rear than on van. Like this one allows you to stride by just retiring her, which is very impactful. And then this one is just overall good for countercharging. So when placed on rear, Soul Blast 2, Countercharge 2. That's actually very good considering how much Counterblast we're actually going to be using. Between multiple different cards in our G zone in combination with Cecilia Reverse and the Grade 2 promo, like a lot of the time you will need that. And then for the triggers, I think defensive draws are just very impactful, especially in this build where you're going to need to build up somewhat of a hand. And so I think for that reason, you could argue for it. I know a lot of lists have been running the Countercharge 2 crit, but I don't necessarily like the fact that it's a 5k, so defensively it just fucks you a bit, so yeah, that's why I'm not running it like that. 3 draw PGs, because obviously you need draw PGs. 4 heal guards, and then the 4 of these stride creds. And then obviously you're running Sanctity because you need it. And like I said before, if you want to gut one of these for a Bracing Angel Ladder, you can. It's just a matter of preference, really. I kind of forgot to, but obviously that's probably what I would do with this list in particular if I was building it. Then for the G Zone, admittedly, this is just Katrina deck. Like, you need this as a, like, if you want to run it as a 4-of and gut the Megaloma, you can. But I'm running Megaloma on the off chance where you need to survive an opponent's push turn, and you just want to put him in an awkward spot. Like, sometimes this does come up a bit. Outside of that, you want Cyclone for the flip up. just so that way your planet tokens get even bigger. Because they get +5 for each one of him face up in G-Zone, so that really starts to add up a bit. And then I'm running one of her just because sometimes it comes up. It's just very dependent on the matchup. And then G-Guard wise, obviously the harmonics is in there, it's mandatory. One of this just because of the counter charge. 2 of this just for the fat shield. This just for the ability to give a unit resist, which might be helpful. And then the 1 Colburn just because I know it's hard to see, but essentially a +5 for each 2 cards your opponent has in hand. It's just overall a nice little tax. So for that reason, I think you could afford to run the Colburn. But outside of that, it's pretty much just you go into Virginal Cecilia to get the force markers, and then you just commit to Katrina for the rest of the game. I don't think you need much else outside of that. Moving on. Alright, so up next we got Jewel Knight. So Jewel Knight is kind of just all over the place, admittedly. A lot of what the deck already came with is actually pretty impactful, but I did make a couple quick edits. So the first thing is you notice there's a 2-2 split between this Salome and the V-Series Salome. And the main reason why we can get away with it is because of this grade 1, which will allow you to directly search for whichever of the Salomes you need. Or maybe if you have both in hand and you just need to get an Ashley out for the multi-attacking, you still can. So obviously you want to run Ashley as a full 4 of just for that reason. Neither the Legion or the Ashley Reverse is impactful in this deck. In fact, it kind of hurts you in the long run. So I think for that reason, you can just afford to just say fuck it and not care about either or. And just hard commit to the Salome plus Ashley, kind of line of play. Then for the grade 2s, I'm specifically running 2 Miranda just specifically for the counter charging, because sometimes there are going to be situations where you'll do Sword Me into Christine, and that's 2 CB right there. And if you have a Miranda there and you have no face-up damage, you can't counter charge 1, which is the one thing that this deck actually lacks a bit. So having a somewhat decent counter charge option is not bad. 4 of this because honestly it's really good. And then 4 copies of the Sybil because why not? And then for the grade 1s, this right here, if you want to just put the Regalis piece in, you can. If you want to put Bracing Ladder in just specifically for the matchups that are really annoying to deal with, by all means do it. That's probably what I would do here now. 4 of this because honestly it's a really decent card. Plus when you ride on top of it, you just +1, so that's not bad. Same thing with this, but you also get a retire, which sometimes matter a bit. But more importantly, you could add this back to hand, which is very impactful. And then, like I stated before, Christine just allows you to search and dig for whatever grade 3 you may possibly need for the turn. So honestly, pretty good. Like before, you still want to run the crits, the draw crits. This is the one where I'm just not sure which overtrigger is actually impactful. Especially going into Festival Collection, I'm just not sure. So for the time being, this is just a placeholder, but whatever overtrigger you feel like is necessary, by all means do it. I'm running the World overtrigger, but this is basically a Martinoa, so you know. And then 4 Stride Fodder crits, 4 Heal Guards, and then 3 of the Assaults, because why not? Oh, and obviously you do need the Sanctitude as well, so wherever you want to fit that in. Is also very impactful, because I kind of just realized I didn't put Sanctitude in this deck. Oops. Oh well. But you pretty much get the gist of it. And then for the G-Zone, similar to Katrina, it's pretty much just Crystal Luster the deck. You pretty much just go into Crystal Luster most of the time anyway. And you only really go into her just specifically for that, turn 1, going first play where you just get double markers and just not care. Outside of that, we have a whole bunch of 1-ups. This is not bad to get an additional marker. This is good for just decent, superior call tactics and just being able to, plus a little bit, so it's not bad. And then for G-Guards, this is where it's kind of all over the place. Mescal is still good, just because it's a nice +10. This is nice for a decent, way to get around bullshit. Colburn is just universally nice to have. Which considering that Royal Paladin and G-Guards are dog shit, sometimes Colburn does come up. This is also nice, depending on the situation, so it's fine. And then obviously this, because nice 20k shield is always good. So honestly, this is probably the most solved out of the bunch. Pretty much a lot of what the actual deck set came with was already pretty good. It was just a matter of fine-tuning it to your ability. So, yeah, let's just move on to the Revengers. Alright, so now for Revengers. Oh boy. Alright, so now there's technically a couple ways you can go about it, but really the big thing, similar to Salome, you can actually afford to go a 2-2 split and probably get away with it, right? And the main reason is because of Slay Hex. So Slay Hex allows you to superior ride a Raging Form Dragon as stand, and then you add it back to hand. So regardless, depending on which situation you end up finding yourself in, if you see this card in hand, you're eating good at that point, because then at that point, this is essentially like a 5th copy of a Raging Form Dragon. And then you can just kind of tutor into whichever one you need, whether it be the Limit Break version or the V version. So at that point, it's just a matter of preference, really. Sometimes you go into this later on into the game anyway, but most times you still want to just have this, specifically for the Raging Wrapped play. And then for the Great 2s, running 3 copies of this, I'm kind of surprised they didn't just include this, because honestly, like, this card is pretty decent. So what you'll do is just guarantee that this grade 1 is your ride target, guarantee this grade 1 is your ride target, and then regardless of which Revenger you ride into, both of them are on standby and you're easily good. So like, for that reason, like, you kind of need it. 4 Dark Blast because it combo extends and allows you to do more bullshit from there. And then 4 mana, which I was very surprised that they didn't include this as like a full 4 of, but honestly, it's kind of just a matter of preference, really. I want to run as a full 4 of because sometimes you actually you want to see this, especially when you go into V Raging form. Sometimes it just matters. So for that reason, it's kind of mandatory. 4 of this because, again, like I stated before, once you ride a grade 3 Revenger, you get a free body on the board, which helps you fuel yourself for whatever you need. 4 Rental because just top deck searching, and also the ability to force the opponent to sack something is also nice. And then we get to the randoms, like tech slots. Obviously, you need Bracing Ladder Angels specifically for, you know, certain matchups like Shiranui and Chaos. So that's always nice to have. 2 copies of this, specifically because it allows you to search for the Raging Form Dragon, which sometimes comes up. 1 copy of the Mar in case you do eventually need to see the other Raging Form like immediately, and you just so happen to not draw into the Slay Hex. Sometimes he just comes up. And then 1 Dark Bond. So Dark Bond, when combined with Mana or Dark Bless, allows you to get an extra body on the board. So sometimes you just need it. And the 1 card we're always going to use for this is, of course, the Grim Revenger. So it is a vanilla crit, but because it has Revenger in its name, you're able to search it off of the Dark Bond. And because you can't recycle this for reasons I'll get to in a moment, Dark Bond actually does come up a bit, especially because it allows you to combo extend. Then this is where the triggers are kind of just debatable here, right? 3 damage crits because, you know, it kind of helps. Then I did a 2-2 split between this heal, which is a Revenger, and the Heal Guard in particular. So this comes up specifically because you're counterblasting a bit in this deck, and so you actually may need this. It's just a matter of preference, really, at that point. 3 draw PGs, and then, like I said, 2 Grim Revengers because of the Dark Bomb play, and then 4 Strive Fodder crits because, honestly, it's really good. And then, obviously, we're running Sanctitude as a 1-up as well, so. And then, obviously, for G-Zone, it kind of just, it's very self-explanatory, but 4 Raging Wrapped because you need it for the Superior Stride play. 3 copies of Chainmaker. If you want to bump it up to a 4, you can. You need this for Flip Fodder. It's a specific, because sometimes this just comes up for Flip Fodder. 2 copies of this, just so that way, in case you can't do other shenanigans and you just want the extra, like, couple drives, sometimes this comes up. And then G-Guard wise, it's very self-explanatory. 1 Gelato because sometimes it comes up. 1 Deep Griever because it's honestly really nice. It allows you to send cards back into the deck, which a lot of the time, if you have Dark Bond, that's your main target for this at the very minimum. And then the rest of them is just kind of whatever you want. And then I'm running 2 Plotmaker because I'm actually surprised they didn't include this. Plotmaker, especially with how many grade 1s we're usually going to have it drop anyway, just from the mad amounts of retire, I'm kind of surprised they didn't include this. So for that reason, you just run this as a 3-up and kind of just, as a 2-up rather, and just go from there. But that is the 2-2 split for that. And there's one other build I want to showcase real quick. And then we get to this build, which focuses and exclusively on this Legion. Legion as a mechanic has been very underutilized in Premium for the longest time. Like, the really good Legions were this, as well as, you know, the Cross. For the longest time, those were the two primary Legions you would see in Premium. And so I'm happy to say you can actually use this, right? Because regardless of... Eventually, as long as you see the Raging Form, which is very likely to happen, best case scenario, you'll have 2 to 3 Force Markers on this one. And then you'll stride into your Chain Rancor, generate the, you know, the double Force Marker power, and then you can actually Legion on a stride, which is very impactful. So, just base numbers on its own, just from, you know, if you ride this and you can't stride, worst case scenario, you'll do Legion, and then because of the Force ones, both the Vanguard and the Legion mate will gain the +10. Which is very impactful. So instead of a 32k, you know, column, it's a 42k column. And then that's on top of having, you know, Chain Rancor, which I think at that point, I'm not entirely sure on the numbers on that, but essentially sometimes you just want to commit to it. So really, outside of that, like, it's pretty, like, down the wire how you want to go about it. I think what really makes this actually somewhat viable is because of the fact that both Vanguards get the power, and also as well, because of the wording of Angel Ladder, technically both the Vanguard and the Legion Mate get +5. So that's an additional, like, power increase that you could possibly get as well, which honestly is really good. Just keep in mind, when you fail to kill your opponent on the Chainraker turn, the Legion Mate goes into Soul, and then you can't just regular Legion unless you ride another copy of him. So do keep that in mind, but usually by the time you do Chainraker plus Legion, you're pretty much killing your opponent unless they just can hard guard everything. Which, if you time it right with the Regalis piece, your opponent is going to have a really bad time. So, honestly, like, there is an argument in a case where you could run the Legion. It's just a matter of preference, really. But yeah, that is going to do it for the deck showcases for the Premium Battle deck sets. I hope you guys did find this interesting. If you did, let me know down in the comments. And let me know if you guys are hyped for these, because honestly, I'm looking forward to playing Premium more, especially when these deck sets come out. And until next time, this is Noah, and I'll catch you guys later. Bye, everyone.